how we're kind of constructing these forms is through like geometric solids. So one way you can kind of like warm up for this is you can even draw you can kind of like throw some geometric forms together. Here, I have a rectangular prism, like a dowel through it. I'm going to try to draw these in a few different ways. Just to get your hand kind of flowing in that way, and then maybe all of that foreshortens down. Yeah, one thing we'll talk about in a little while is maybe we throw some light on there. Anyways, so just just a kind of like different way to warm up than our like gestures and stuff. So what we're gonna do first is let's see. I'm just gonna kind of jump into it. So with the arm, we're not gonna go full torso. We're kind of zooming in a little bit. But I'm just gonna, hit you with the rib cage first. Something like this, and then we have the clavicle coming off. So sternum's kind of like this bow, kind of necktie structure here, and then the clavicle from the top is almost this like. Think about like a bow or like bicycle handlebars. It kind of comes from the front, and you see that from the top, kind of pushes back. So if I wanted to express this on the left side, maybe I could come in from here to here. Something like that. Yeah, bicycle handlebars. Anyways. And then on the back, we could probably actually see this a little bit with like an articulated skeleton, but we have the scapula coming back here. And then there's a joint out here. Full disclosure, I forget how it overlaps. I think the scapula comes around like this. And then we have, I don't know, that might come in a little. But then we have the ball joint of the humerus, somewhere in here. So I'm kind of starting with the skeletal structure, and then we're going to add on top of that. And then we have one of our good friends from last week, the pectoralis major. As I mentioned, you have like the clavicular portion here that runs along the clavicle. And then this large mass of it that sits on the rib cage. And that almost like kind of conical tail that actually reaches over and attaches under the ball joint here. Something like that. So I'm gonna fill that in lightly. And then one of our kind of main features of the arm is the deltoid, which actually has 3 heads or sections. You have your anterior head, which is anterior just means front. And it runs along the clavicle, hits here. Then you have the medial head here, and then we'll see this in a minute, but then you have a posterior head. And I'll just darken these in between. And one great thing that we'll see from a different angle is that we have this sort of like, you know, cone or like teardrop shape that runs down the midline of the arm, but we'll see that in a minute. Our main muscle of the anterior upper arm is the biceps. So that runs down here, and then we have our, there's a tendon that runs here across that joint. And you can usually see it depending on the build of the person, but then you can usually see triceps peeking out from behind here. And triceps is basically largely a posterior muscle, but it does have some corner form on it, and so it will hit the sides, the corners. You can see it from the side from some angles. And I've foreshortened this a little bit. But if I draw, so this is mostly, a muscle diagram, but here are my epicondyles here. I'm going to throw this foreshortened dowel in here and here. So you can see that I'm not really seeing either side of it. If you were, I would express my dowel in this way, where you'd see one of the sides. And so this is, and I'm just going to leave this as it is. Here's the box of my wrist. And I'm actually going to leave this handless for now. And on the lateral side, we have our flexor group. So we can split that down the middle. And we have our flexor group. This is, I lied, I'm actually going to show the hand here, just to give you some orientation. This is going to be our thumb side. the medial side, let's see, I'll do pink on this one. Here we have those ridge muscles that are actually going to reach up past that dowel, the epicondyle here, and create this kind of corner form. Down to the wrist. And so I'm going to outline this a little bit with some graphite. Good so far? So then I'll do back 3/4 of the arm, and then we'll talk armpit a little bit. So just to give you some orientation, here's the neck, anterior curve of the neck, posterior curve of the spine, anterior curve of the lower back. Actually, I should draw this bigger. Okay, something like that. Yeah. So again, here's our spinal furrow. And one thing I brought up a little bit was the shoulder blade last week. So to find that, this is our C7, our 7th cervical vertebrae, which is, you can kind of see that on some people. It kind of pops out here. And so that's the end of your neck and the beginning of the thoracic. So below that will be T1. And so that's your thoracic vertebrae from here to here. And then lumbar here. And so what you can do, you can kind of come down at an angle here. And then with the scapula, somewhere on this size. I do this sort of like rounded triangle, and with a articulate, a human figure, a lot of the time you won't see the scapula itself, unless you're in a certain position where like it's kind of sticking out, and you can see kind of one of the bony kind of spinous edges of it. But mostly what you're going to see is muscles around it for the most part. And I'm just going to throw this one in over here. And as I mentioned, part of this kind of reaches around and meets the clavicle on the other side, like this. And then again, ball joint of the humerus. I'm going to kick this arm out a little bit here as well. just trim some snow off the sides. It's good. It's good. You just, yeah, just cut. Yeah, if you get your snowman, technically speaking, just cut some of those edges off a little. Yeah, it might, really, we have this kind of flat edge here. My rib cage is a little wide as well. But so here I have the humerus. This is where those epicondyles are, and so that's going to be, before I jump into this, that's where we're going to see that dowel. Or that's where we're not going to see it. That's where we're going to make that dowel. We're not seeing it. We're inventing it to kind of organize what we're seeing. Then first I'm going to look for that deltoid again. And I'm gonna try to keep my colors consistent. So here, I'm just going to clarify this a little bit. This kind of front, or from this position right, maybe 2/3 of the spine of the scapula, that's actually where the deltoid comes that far back on that posterior head. So from this position, that's going to wrap around and attach here. And then we have a few to kind of create that anterior wall of the armpit. We'll have a few of these muscles coming off. So we have infraspinatus here. And then I'm going to use pink for the teres muscles. Well, to kind of layer this accurately, actually, I'm actually going to put in what sits on top here is actually the triceps. Here. And so, like I said, if we, draw this in on a rectangle, one kind of interesting thing about the triceps is that, so we have like the back here. And it reaches up something like this. And so basically we have this, which is a back form, and then our basically our heads of the triceps. This one I think goes lower. I don't remember. But basically, we have corner form, corner form, and then the tendon is the part that's like truly on the back. But really, so, you know, it goes something like that. Anyways, I'm getting a little sidetracked. So here's our triceps with the tendon. And the important part is up in here, so that's kind of how this overlaps. And then the teres muscles. Color to the side on those. They're also going to be in purple. You have teres minor here, and then teres major is a larger muscle here. And then if we think back to last week, one thing we saw a little bit too was the latissimus dorsi, which kind of gives this, you know, it's a pretty large muscle. I'll just draw it to here. Because I think it hits something like that.
Yeah, it kind of like wraps the back of the spine and then comes down a little bit. I feel like that's
Like here.
like yeah, like it comes to there and then it kind of narrows down the back.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like this sort of like triangular.
And then there's like almost a piece of the bottom.
Yeah, and then it has, because it has like this like cord, this almost like cord-like part here. There's kind of two parts to it, and then more of like a sheet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's good. It's great. I was just, when I was reviewing all this, I was just focused like up in here. And then, you know, if we look at the elbow, so we have those epicondyles, you know, we're throwing this dowel through here. And then here is the, you know, depending on the position of the forearm, and maybe I'll just straighten this one out. But we have that olecranon process here. So I'll just erase this up to here. And then if I do straighten that, so here we have ulna, which is thicker at the top. Olecranon process is on there. And then it thins towards the wrist. Radius does the opposite, where it's thin up at the elbow and then thickens at the wrist. And this is kind of your main mass of the wrist. And so I'm going to start with those ridge muscles. So they kind of reach up here past the front. This is a back view of the arm. Past that condyle here, and then down into the arm, down towards the wrist. You should have a little bit of the flexors. I think you'll see them over here a little bit. This is the ulnar furrow. Yeah, I think that's okay there. And then the extenders here. And we'll specifically look at the hand later, but this is a foreshortened box of the wrist. And so really, I just went through those different muscle groups. But to kind of summarize that from like the front angle, if we're looking at the upper arm, here, deltoid, something like that. Biceps, triceps here. We'll have that condyle here, or that dowel here. And then basically what you can do is we can kind of generalize this as like a almost like a cylindrical mass here through the forearm. And as long as we box that out at the end, I think at least, at this point that's kind of a good amount of information there. So that's again our two main kind of points here. Dowel through the elbow, box out the wrist. And then just so I can draw that Loomis flap for you in real time, here's say our rib cage. Here's our sternum, so we're looking at the front, right? And then how I'm going to draw this, is, I'll start with that pectoral shape, and then our little tail that reaches up. And then I'll kind of bring that down here. And we have this sort of overlap. And that's, if our arm's reaching up. So I even can throw like a little cylinder in there for the upper arm. So the main idea here is that we have this overlap. So if we have like this arm reaching up, and then this arm down, So that's our kind of attachment there. Does that make sense? So basically we're, oversimplifying, and then we can kind of add on top of that. Let's see. And the layering from the front. That was the last thing. So again, I'm going to draw the middle ball of a snowman. And then I'm going to throw this kind of up like this. So your clavicle will raise with your arm a little bit. And so I am, with this blue pencil, I'm going to very lightly indicate that our flap see that? I'll leave my pencil down so it focuses. And then I'm just going to do this with one color. Let's do red. And so basically we have this overlap, and I'm going to go from front to back. Now I'm going to do it with mechanical pencil. It survives. And so basically, if the ball joints, somewhere around here, we have pectoralis coming up here, that kind of like tail-like form here. And then just behind that, we have biceps, somewhere like that. Ooh. Just behind that, and kind of inserting in between, is kind of the bundle of infraspinatus, teres major, latissimus dorsi, which makes that posterior wall. And then we will see a little bit of triceps here. And then depending on, on kind of musculature of the person, you probably will see, basically with the arm up like this, you will see that deltoid bunch a little bit here. And I've definitely exaggerated that. Hmm.